spent many years consulting with some of the largest corporations in the world. You had you were on the fast track at a very large consulting firm. You were about to make partner, I believe, and then something happened. And I'd love to delve into this courageous decision with you today. Did I tee you up correctly? Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It was probably a watershed moment in my career, a very important decision that I had to make, and I was, as you can imagine, the process that led up to it and everything that came after has been extremely meaningful and life-changing for me. So I look forward to this opportunity to talk to you about this.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. So let's just delve right in. You had an epic career at Deloitte, right? You spent many years there. You worked with some of the biggest companies in the world. You moved up the ranks. You also moved around quite a bit. Is that correct? 10 or 11 times? Did I remember correctly?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I joined Deloitte in 2007, and I actually joined Deloitte out of B School. This was in India. So actually, the Deloitte office in Hyderabad, it is a part of the US company. Literally within weeks, I found myself traveling to the United States. Began in Orange County, and then it was a very project by project basis, right? So I moved around. I think it was 10 homes in 10 years. In 2008, I got married to my wife, and within a couple months, we found ourselves here in LA. I think we moved from Orange County to Los Angeles to Dallas to New Jersey to Manhattan, Little Rock, Arkansas, back to India where my son was born, then back here to Atlanta, then back to LA, and then after that, we stayed stable in LA while I began to travel for work. So I was actually doing the management consultant lifestyle, traveling 50 out of 52 weeks in a year, but spent my years in Seattle and Dallas and Charlotte and Massachusetts and a variety of other places, including, some work in Southern California as well. So it was a lot of movement, as you can imagine. My life has been characterized by, quote unquote, being on the road. But I think that's kind of what was leading up to the point that we're talking about.
100%. And so these decisions, obviously, now you have a serious constituent. You have a wife, right? How do you manage those two relationships, that full dedication that your career demands with, hey, honey, I'm not sure if I'm not sure if this was clear when we got married, but we're going to move a whole bunch. I'm not sure you even knew that, right? But how do you manage those worlds? How do you get buy-in? How do you make it a true partnership?
It's a great question. I sometimes I would wish that I could have my wife sitting here so that she could address this, and you'll hear us give maybe even different answers. You're right. At the time that we got married, we both knew the career that I was in, right? And as a young couple, being on the road and coming to a new country, settling down into a new place, the adventure, the excitement that comes with that. The world was my oyster, but it was our oyster, right, at that point, right? And we were really having a lot of fun together. What ended up happening, though, right, I think is, you're based in a place, you make your roots, you make your friends, you get to know people, you get to find a level of success and stability. And guess what? You got to move, and you got to move, right? And at some point it was, hey, we're building a home and we're building a career and success at the same time. What do we want, right? What does success really look like for us? Not for an individual, but for us as a family, right? And so it was something that was building up over the years, right?
Yeah.
You know how this thing works, right? When you're on the fast track to success, you're like, just the next milestone, and it'll give me a lot of flexibility to make a decision, or the next milestone. But every milestone leads to the next. And I think the milestone that I found myself at was, the prize, right? The big prize, which is the partnership. Yeah. In fact, I think from my perspective, it was deep into the interview process. I was actually a week away from the next interview, right? And at that point, knowing where I was and knowing the decision that was at my hands, I basically had to make the decision to say, what do I really want? what does success really look like for me, right? And then without, what happened that evening, I remember the evening very distinctly. I called my mentor, I called my coach, I called my counselor, I called the head of the practice, and I said, I'm sorry, but I have to reprioritize my life. There is something that is more important to me than all this success, right? My prize is elsewhere. And I think they understood, they were very supportive of it, and that mattered a lot to me. It was only the next morning that I called my wife and told her what I had done.
Yeah, right. You had an existential moment. I mean, you had an existential moment. It sounds like like a Jerry Maguire type of moment, right? Where it was a lot of things been brewing for a while. When you were on the road leading up to this big decision, 50 out of 52 years, was there some duality there in the sense that it's exciting, I'm working on super interesting problems, and there's some guilt and some I don't know, what do you say, maybe loss? What was that like emotionally for both you and your family?
I think you actually described it really well. The duality of winning and losing at the same time, was persistent, right? There was a book that I read some time ago, right? And I think, now the title of it is a little controversial, but the title of it was Choosing to Cheat, right? And it's by a guy by the name of Andy Stanley. And I think the core premise of the book was that no one is going to be able to give 100% to everything that they do. And at any point of time, in order to do something, they're cheating on something else, right? And the question is, what are you willing to cheat on? And I think what that drove home for me is, and I'll talk about this again and again, right? That my decisions or my trajectory needed to be based on a foundational construct of, do I know who I am and what I value and what I want, right? There was a bigger purpose that there needed to be a mission rather than the goal is a partnership at a management consulting firm. Right?
I love how you described you and your wife essentially setting your own vision and creating your own set of what is success or not. I guess, hey, it was exciting, the adrenaline's fun. I imagine that probably happened on a number of occasions you had to revisit. Is that correct?
It did. And you can imagine, right? I'll be honest when I say, and, she will also say this, right? Our marriage struggled, right? Yeah. And there's no question about it, right? And for people that are going through something like this to admit that the struggle is real, right? And to admit that, when there are flashpoints, right? And, debates and arguments and when things get heated, you can't just wish it away and say, this is not right, and I'm just go back to doing what you're doing, right? It brings you to points of decision, right? For me, that decision was something we just kept pending until, I felt like no one is going to make the decision for me. I got to make that decision for myself, right?
So you're getting on airplanes and say Sunday, Monday, sometimes feeling, there's some pressure from home and you've got pressure from work and these things are building and then to move forward to, well, I love what you said earlier. Hey, success is just one more move away, right? Hey, what I want is just one more move away. That carrot is just, you're so close. It's always an inch away.
That's right.
And then you ended up where most people, they give their right arm to end up, which is, hey, the partnership review process. You've reached the pinnacle of success. Because that not only, I imagine, is obviously the prestige, the choice assignments, the financial rewards. This is, in some ways, a prescripted American dream.
That's right.
And I can't imagine, I really want to get into psychology. I love where you're at, because most people, I would imagine, coming into consulting, either leave early on in their career.
Right. That's right.
They get a taste of it. Usually a client hires them, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or it's much later in their career. They've made partner, they've had some success there, moving on. You were at an interesting spot. Tell me a little bit about that, because that's not usual.
That's actually exactly right. When people make the decision is usually a lot earlier, or sometimes they make the decision at the point that I was at, but it is not when they are as successful. It's when they realize that they may not be able to kind of make the jump to the next, right? And that, I think, was a little bit, trust me, this played on my mind, right? What people thought of me. Yeah. It always, and I realize this sometimes can be a barrier to courageous decision making when it becomes not about yourself and it becomes about, how other people will perceive, right? Where, for example, the people that knew me well and that I was deep in conversation with, they called me a fool. They used the word to say, it's crazy what you're doing, walking away from this. All you needed to do was just cross the boundary and then you could do whatever you want. But I knew what would happen once I crossed the boundary is, guess what? The financial rewards are going to pay off, right? I'm going to stick in it for some more time. And then it would have been more trade-off. There were other people that didn't know me that then made the assumption that, oh, okay, he opted out because he felt he wasn't going to make the cut, right? And so contending against those points of view, ultimately it was like, there is making the decision, right? Making the decision at the end of the day, I think is about, you can't be the frog in the well, right? You have to know what you want. And at the end of the day, no one else can be the one that either gives you the courage, right, or forces you in any direction, right? You've got to be the one to make a decision for the right reason. I actually say this a lot, right? Courage is different from being impulsive. Both courage and impulsion allow you to take risks, right? But impulsiveness does not come from a core underlying belief, right? And I think that night when I made the decision, it was a moment of clarity. I mean, why hadn't I made the decision until that point? But in that moment of clarity, I knew exactly what I needed to do.
So I love that because there's no saying clarity equals energy.
That's right. That's right.
Exactly. Clarity gives you the energy because essentially, look, again, I just want to get into this decision because for folks who have not spent time in the consulting world, this is the Super Bowl, right? I mean, you've had a successful college football career and you're being drafted by the NFL, right? And so you make a decision not knowing what the future would hold. It wasn't like you had another job or I'm not getting a sense that you had a clear sense of career trajectory yet. Is that true? You just knew that this wasn't for you.
That's right. And this is a really hard one, right? Because I loved my job. When you're really good at it and it's like from the first day I was in consulting, I was like, this is my career. This is what I was made for.
Yeah.
I was very good at what I did. Yeah. I got to do some phenomenal work with Deloitte, working with clients that were at the cutting edge of technology, and you're always working on the next best thing. I thrived on that, right? In fact, I used to tell people, and I still tell people, by the way, I work at the intersection of sexy and useful. And it gave me energy. It gave me passion for doing what I was doing, right? So you're right. At the point when I had to make the decision, it was actually, I had no idea what was going to come next, right? I did not have a job lined up. If I was a lifelong consultant, it meant that I would be leaving Deloitte to do something that was not consulting, and I had no idea what exactly.
No idea. Well, and I want to touch on two things. Number one, it sounds like obviously you had data building up, but intuition plays a role in our lives as well, right? This sense of intuition. So my question is for you, is intuition data, number one? And number two, when you had a firm resolution about what you wanted to do, and then you said you told people, and they said you're a fool, or they made impression, they had certain thoughts about you that weren't easy to deal with. I don't think when you think people looking at you like, oh, you failed at something. I'm not saying that's what they did, but something like that. Yeah. Those aren't easy. And any moments of this was 100% decision. Now I'm at 80%. Yeah. Am I making sense? Is this making sense?
Oh, yeah. I'm in my head a lot. You can imagine, right? There is not a single thing I've done in my life that I haven't second guessed.
I love that. That's honesty. Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of things, but like I said, there's a moment of clarity. There's a point at which you take the action related to the decision. Then there's a brief honeymoon period, and then the second guessing happens, and the third guessing, and the fourth guessing, right? And honestly, I will say that the work that came after wasn't the easiest work in the world, and could get very frustrating at times, right? And in many points of time, it's easy to go back to things were great without remembering all the challenges.
Nostalgia.
The nostalgia, right? And basically saying, maybe if I was still back there, it could have been different. But you know what is really important to me, and I hold on to this, is I can never forget that moment of clarity that I had.
Yeah.
Right? And I keep going back to that. I know why I did it, and I know who I am, and I know what I want, right? And I know that now, if I look at a holistic picture of success and who I want to be, I'm a much better, happier person today than I was 3 years ago. And my family, and this is important, is a lot more happier. It is our collective success. I didn't talk about this a lot, right? But a lot of this had to do with my son. My son was born in 2011. He just turned 10 years old. I got to be the father that was visiting him on weekends.
Yeah.
Because the rest of the time I'm not there. And my weekends were 100% dedicated to him.
Sure.
That was not enough. The amount of things that I missed. See, at the end of the day, right, I also had to come to this resolution in my head. This is not me forfeiting my career for my family. This is...
Yeah, because that's an unfair burden to put on them, right? Now you're a model, right?
That's exactly right.
Right.
It was me finding a different route to success where it was more utilitarian, where we could all be successful together. My career has still been successful. I've had a great time, right? I've been doing work that I enjoy doing, but guess what? My son is happy and my wife is happy and we are thriving, right? And for me, that is a good example to say sometimes the fears that keep us, where we are, that prevent us from taking the next step are very often unfounded, right? I had to test that. I had to take a leap of faith to actually prove that, yeah.
But so you pick up the phone as well, because this is an important piece. You call your wife and you tell her what you've done, right? Did you get the response that you wanted?
No.
Oh, okay.
She said, "I don't believe you did that." She said, "Are you crazy?" I forget the exact language that she used, but she did say that, and I think she felt that maybe I was acting in impulsiveness. But trust me, like after we talked about it and after we've, the couple of years that have followed, right, I think the partnership has been extremely strong, right? Yeah, and for me, that makes a difference.
So your story ends quite well, because tell us a little bit about where you ended up and what this has afforded you, because I know you said there was a transition period, and I think that's true. I mean, I came to the United States from a different country. There was definitely some culture shock. I think that could also translate in careers and jobs, right? You go from one organization you've been with for over a decade to a new company or new companies.
That's right.
So you said initially there was a little bit of a transition period, but tell us a little bit about how the story ended, because I think our audience would love to track the full.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and I think my career at consulting really set me up well for this. And I think in many ways, I feel like if I had left at a time earlier than I did, I would not be where I am.
Okay.
I believe that things work together for a reason. I believe that very strongly. I'll just track this very, very briefly. There was a 3-month period, and I actually applaud Deloitte for doing this. They have a program where, for high-performing people that choose to move on, they actually support you in helping find a position for you. It's great. It's a fantastic alumni type of program, right? And as part of that, I got introduced to the company where I'm working at, where actually Deloitte had a substantial presence. I was offered the role of Vice President of Transformation, helping lead the next phase of transformation for Hitachi Vantara, which is a subsidiary of the bigger Hitachi company. That's an $80 billion company. Very exciting role for a company that is going through a very fascinating journey. The company itself has gone through a lot of change, right? I'm on my 6th boss in 2 years, where a lot of change has happened. My role itself has changed. I joined to lead transformation. Now I'm leading transformation as well as strategy and operations for the digital infrastructure business unit. I'm really doing well, but my company is doing well as well. And I think this is also, like, I keep thinking about this, right? The fact that I had to take a small decision, a small, step of faith at one point of time, has given me so much more perspective and boldness in taking subsequent steps of faith with my company as well, right? Being able to say, in the middle of everything else, having optimism for where we're going to land, being able to kind of guide people towards courageous decision making as a group, right? It's fantastic. Today, I'm very happy where I'm at, right? And I think if it was not for the journey that I went through personally, as well as the journey I went through professionally, and everything that I learned along the way up till that point of decision, I would not be where I'm at today.
Do you, and I love where you're at, and I love the fact that it sounds like this decision, how can I put it? This decision prepared you for the role, and it opened up new avenues. It sounds like it introduced you to aspects of yourself that you didn't know existed.
100%. I'll give you a little bit of additional background.
Please.
My dad used to work for the Indian Space Research Organization, but he was a lifer. That was the one job he had for his entire life until the time he retired. Genetically, I think I'm predisposed towards stability, right? And it was always hard for me as a result to see myself taking a massive risk, right? I think to exactly your point, this showed me, the relationship between risk and reward, right? But also, my dad made decisions for a very similar reason. He knew who he was at the end of the day. He knew his purpose, he knew his mission, and that led him down a certain path, right? And for me, rediscovering my purpose and my mission helped me make a decision, even though there was risk involved in it. The risk became secondary, right, to the overall goal.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And I've had a series of those moments myself where I've been introduced to, you have courage, you have vision, you can trust your instinct, but you do walk on some water for a little bit. Last question for you, Simon, is, do you believe that courageous decisions like this have expiration dates? And what I mean by that is, if you'd said, this is interesting, let me sit on it for a month, that the outcome could have been different. I guess what I'm alluding to is sometimes doors open. Do you think it's important to walk through them very quickly? That at some point they will close, so to speak. The courage will evaporate.
I don't believe so. I don't believe that's true at all, right? I think there are such things as missed opportunities,
okay,
but there's no such thing as finite opportunities.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
Right. I can count the number of times in my career when I could have made a choice to do something different, right? But if you ask me to kind of look back in retrospect over everything, there wouldn't be a regret. There is, right? Everything that I did prepared me for where I am today. Here's another interesting tidbit for you. My wife is now a writer. She is about to publish her first book, which will come out next year. And guess what it's about? It's about our journey together, right? And it's about change, and it's about movement, and it's about managing through transition and finding identity, finding home, and finding purpose in the middle of all of that. I think that alone, like this conversation that I'm having with you and that book that she's writing, talks about how together, as individuals, but also together, we've grown, right? And we've seen what it means to actually, make the right decisions for the right reasons.